Johnny, explain out the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Someone says, what is the carbon to nitrogen ratio? What is it from a 30,000 foot view, and then drop down a little bit?
Okay, so I'd start from the very, very top looking down. Carbon to nitrogen, when we talk about that, it's usually about the life within the soil, more times than not.
Okay.
So as you're dropping in, it's what type of life form's going to survive in those situations. Okay, so you start really dropping. So it's how much carbon you have to nitrogen. Mm-hmm. Okay. Kind of going in the swing of things. So if you're below 10 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, okay, that's a very tight ratio. Okay. Now I've seen it down to 7 to 1, and that's like, oh no levels. If you get above 8 to 1, bacteria are going to thrive in a tighter carbon to nitrogen ratio.
So just to clarify, a tight would be a 1 in 10?
10 to 1.
10 to 1. 10 carbons?
10 carbons to 1 nitrogen.
To 1 nitrogen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just for bacteria to be bacteria, they need 8 to 1.
Okay.
Okay. And it's just how much food that they get from the carbon versus the nitrogen that's there. Because they're going to be using both. And they want balance as well.
Sure.
So if that balance gets too less of carbon, there's not much life going on. It can't support life because there's not carbon there. Yeah. Okay. So you get to that 10 to 1, bacteria is starting to cook more. You get to 12 to 1. There's enough food source for that bacteria to do its thing. And then after that, you get to your fungal. So fungus needs a 24 to 1, so it's a wider ratio. Wow. Okay. That's where it thrives in. Okay. I'm not saying that there's not certain species that can handle lower, but they thrive in that 24 to 1.
Yeah.
Now, one thing to be very careful about, though, and this is where we get to farming, strictly farming, okay? If you get up to a 24 to 1, there could be a chance that bacteria now is not feeling as hunky-dory. So now it's going to steal nitrogen. So inside of that bacteria to be balanced, needs to steal nitrogen from the soil instead of steal carbon, because it has abundance of carbon. Okay. There's more levels. There's more microorganisms we can talk about. But at the end of the day, with most farm ground, I haven't seen it above, that 15 to 18.
Okay.
So let's focus on there below. Okay. That's how I feel.
So is bacteria and fungi... It's bacteria and... Kirk's having a spaz attack back there.
It's all good.
Is bacteria and fungi, are they working together or not? Two different families needing the same food but at different amounts. And how do you sounds like what's good for one is not so good for the other.
Well, and I think you can talk like Regen Labs doing their PFLA tests. Just what is your ratio between fungus to bacteria?
I need to do one of those.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of paints a picture, you know. And what I mean by that is it's letting you know, it's just like cover crops. The more diversity of life, the better off it's going to be. There's more synergies with having both. With that being said, most of the time I strive for 12 to 1.
Okay.
If you get up to a 15 to 1 when it comes to row crops, I start paying attention of like, okay, we need to tone back a little bit, because if you get above there's a chance that you will still nitrogen. Like
toning back on the carbon?
We got that in check.
Okay.
That's where it needs to be.
Sure.
So then when you're applying nutrients, applying nitrogen, that carbon to nitrogen ratio tells you, do I need to split apply? Or do I need to, or can I put more up front and save a pass?
Sure.
And that's where you get into the more carbon you have in your soil, you can tie nitrogen and you can tie up phosphorus. I shouldn't say tie up, but they come together.
Hold in availability.
Yeah. So then the plant's able to take it.
Okay.
So like I said, I strive for a 12 to 1. And once we're there, you can put a little bit more up front and be okay. But the moment you drop by 10 to 1, you're at a situation there that you need to split apply.
Okay.
Because if you front load in that situation, you're going to crash that system. Because most times producers are going out there and they're putting, let's just say, 150 pounds of N. They just go out there and broadcast it at the beginning of the year.
I'm printing out my region test.
Oh, sweet.
So I can pull it. So I can, because there's a C to N ratio on here, right? Yes, there is.
There should be. Yep.
I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to print it out. So this is the no nitrogen wheat field that people have heard me beating a dead horse. Which actually, when this podcast dropped, we'll have had a podcast that talked about when my wife's uncle chopped the legs off a frozen horse with an axe. But yeah, you have to listen to the podcast if you haven't. It's a great story. And this was taken in February, end of February.
Yeah.
So on here, on the region test, I would just go off of this. So my carbon to nitrogen ratio is
13.4.
I have no idea what that means, Johnny. But that's where I want to be?
You're in your zone. I mean, that's where I would feel great.
I'm in the zone. Maverick told me I'm in the zone. I can die a happy man.
Well, and one huge thing on this, and this is why I like Haney tests, is that organic nitrogen.
Okay.
Okay. If you take a traditional soil test in that water extraction zone, if you take a traditional test, it's just going to tell you nitrate. So, like on here, on this Haney extraction, it says that you have 3.5 parts per million nitrate.
Okay.
Okay. If you saw that number and said you only had 6 pounds of nitrogen out there, you'd be like, okay, we got to compensate.
Sure.
Right? But then you go over, you look at this water extractable, and
Which
it says
one's that?
It says H2O extraction, and then underneath it says ORG nitrogen parts per million N.
Okay.
On the top.
Yep.
That's 14.9. Let's call it 15. Okay. Take that times 2. That's 30 pounds.
Yeah.
In an organic form. So it means it has carbon tied to it.
Okay.
This is where you're seeing your benefit of your carbon to nitrogen ratio. You said this is a field that you didn't apply anything to. Okay. This
has been my baby for the last, this is the first field Ben started helping me on.
Okay.
So this is we're going into year 5.
Okay.
Of really intense. Really, I say really intense. Really intense sounds like we've done a ton to it. We've been much more specific in the applications that we decide to do to it.
Yes.
And had cover crops 2 of the years, strip tilled,
okay.
Corn, bean, wheat rotation,
okay,
with cover crops mixed in there.
Okay.
So, guys, if you've liked the information that you've seen so far, go ahead and check out the full-length podcast on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe there. It's also on all the major podcast platforms. We're constantly dropping info and more content on all the social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. Check it out for a lot more content.